So it's finally happened. Sauber have released their new name for the 2024 season, and it's terrible. Stake F1 team really doesn't have a ring to it, but most importantly, it's no longer linked to Alfa Romeo. Alfa Romeo Racing have been part of the Formula 1 grid for 6 years, creating some of the most beautiful liveries we have ever seen, and they've also been home to 7 different Formula 1 drivers in that time. But which driver was best? Let's take a look at the drivers who raced for Alfa Romeo, how they got on for the Italian team, and rank them from the worst to the best. I should start by saying I'm not looking at every single Alfa Romeo driver ever. Back when Formula 1 started in 1950 and again in 1951, Alfa Romeo was home to legendary drivers like Giuseppe Farina and Juan Manuel Fangio, who won the Drivers' Championship with the Italian team. And they also made a comeback in the early 80s, taking part in Grand Prix from 1980 to 1985, boasting drivers like Mario Andretti, Andrea De Cesaris, and Riccardo Patrese. However, that time was a lot less successful, with a 6th place in the Constructors' Championship during the 1983 season being the best that it ever got. But because those eras of Formula 1 were so long ago and so different to the sport that we have in front of us today, I feel like we can only really compare the drivers that have taken to the track in the most recent iteration of Alfa Romeo that's been flying the Italian flag alongside the Swiss flag of Sauber. That era has run from 2017 up until 2023 and has seen 7 drivers from Christian Ericsson and Charles Leclerc, Kimi Raikkonen, Antonio Giovinazzi, Robert Kubica, Zhou Guangyu, and of course Valtteri Bottas. From those 7 drivers, pause the video, leave your rankings in the comments down below, and let's see if we match by the end. At the bottom of my rankings is Robert Kubica, and not because I necessarily think he's the worst driver on this list. I think the Polish driver has more than proved his talents during his career, but during this Alfa Romeo era, he was the test driver from 2020 through to 2022, and in that time, he only raced twice, replacing Kimi Raikkonen for the Dutch Grand Prix and the Italian Grand Prix in 2021. Neither race was overly exciting for him. It's really tough being dropped into a car at such short notice, but he did a job. He had a little tangle with Yuki Tsunoda during the sprint race in Monza. However, his 15th place and 14th place finishes in the Grand Prix were professionally executed. Although I do need to add, despite the fact that he only raced in 2 Grand Prix, Robert Kubica finished the 2021 season in 20th place in the drivers' standings out of 21 drivers, ahead of Nikita Mazepin, and that alone is just brilliant. In 6th, I have Italian Jesus himself, Antonio Giovinazzi. And this might be a touch harsh, considering he came into the team as an almost rookie in 2019. And the reason I say almost rookie is because he raced a couple of times in 2017, replacing an injured Pascal Wehrlein. But those 2 races were like a perfect microcosm of Gio. He was absolutely sublime and finished in 12th place in Australia, followed up by crashing out in both qualifying and the race in China. But anyway, back to his time at Alfa. It started off shaky. I remember he crashed out on the final lap of the Belgian Grand Prix whilst running in 9th place, and Frederic Vasseur came out afterwards saying they almost ditched him out of the team there and then. But in the second half of the season, he was much better. He started chipping in with a couple of points finishes and his career best finish in Brazil with a 5th place. Then moving on to the next 2 seasons he had with the team after that, he only scored points 5 times, a couple of 9th places and the rest 10ths. You can blame the car, of course, but it always felt like there was more to come with Antonio. He was just a bit too error prone to really deliver on the expectations, and he never managed to beat an aging Kimi Raikkonen. This is a weird one because Marcus Ericsson was with the team from 2015 to 2018, but obviously the Alfa Romeo name was only incorporated into the team for his final season in 2018. So because I'm ranking Alfa Romeo drivers, I can only take that final season into contention, which to be fair was one of his better seasons, arguably his best season, but still not a good season. The year started on a massive high at the Bahrain Grand Prix. He finished in 9th place. He scored points for the first time since the 2015 Italian Grand Prix, 49 races before, and to be fair to him, he went on and scored points another 5 times in 2018. The issue was, He was in his 5th full season as a Formula 1 driver and was met by the absolute force of Charles Leclerc in his rookie season. Leclerc outscored him by 30 points, beat him in all but 3 races, outqualified him 17-4 and had over twice as many laps in the top 10. It was a bloodbath, and unfortunately for Marcus Ericsson, Charles Leclerc showed that that car was pretty good, and in Formula 1 you can't really afford to be obliterated by your teammate, especially if they are a rookie, even if it is Charles Leclerc. The first driver on the list to take to the team after the 2022 regulation changes and is still with the team now as they move away from the Alfa Romeo tag is Guangyu. Now, I was quite defensive of China's first Formula 1 driver during the 2022 season. I thought for a rookie, he was pretty good. He put in some solid performances, but got really unlucky with reliability and collisions that he was not to blame for. He retired from 4 Grand Prix with mechanical issues and then was smashed into by Nicholas Latifi and of course had that huge shunt in Britain thanks to George Russell. So we never saw him put a run of races together and therefore he only managed 3 points finishes. That meant coming into 2023, I wanted to see more from him. I wanted to see if he could step up his game, and honestly, he just hasn't. Again, he scored points 3 times, but I would say there were only 2 eye-catching performances all year from him. He battled really well in Spain with Yuki Tsunoda and Oscar Piastri and got a more than deserved 9th place finish. And then in Hungary, he was blisteringly fast in qualifying, placing himself P5 for the start of the Grand Prix, only for the car to then go wrong. And with Audi coming in soon, I just can't imagine that Joe will be the driver that they decide to build their team around, and I don't think he's shown enough that he'll be in Formula 1 for that much longer. Although quite similar things can be said about his current teammate, Valtteri Bottas, who is just above him in this ranking. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad that we started to see the real personality of Bottas instead of the robot that we saw at Mercedes, who just had to stand there and be behind Lewis Hamilton, but his racing in the last couple of years since moving over to Alfa Romeo hasn't really got me on the edge of my seat. It started unbelievably with 7-point scoring finishes in the first 9 races with the team. That stint alone gets him this high up on the list. I even coined the term the Bottas barrier in 2022, as drivers had to make their way past him in the drivers' standings to prove that they'd actually turned their season around. But his season just kinda stopped. In the next 13 races, he only had 2-point scoring finishes, as well as 5 retirements. Although similar to Guangyu, that was mainly down to the car falling apart. However, 2023, I just wasn't inspired by him. It never felt like he could string results together, despite scoring points 4 times and out-qualifying Joe 15 times in a pretty terrible Alfa Romeo car. I again don't know if he did enough to show Audi that he can be the main man for them, especially as they take over more and more of the team. I could see Bottas moving on. And in fact, I have another Finn just above him in my rankings, Kimi Raikkonen, leaving Ferrari to rejoin Alfa Romeo Sauber, the team that he made his Formula 1 debut with in 2001, to come full circle and end his Formula 1 career there was just beautifully poetic. And not only that, he still managed to put in some great drives even as his career was coming to an end. I mean, it was a clear decline from Kimi Raikkonen over his time at Alfa Romeo. He had an insane start to the 2019 season, scoring 31 points before the summer break, putting him 8th in the Drivers' Championship after 12 races, something no Alfa Romeo driver has even come close to since then. But the car still fell off and he managed a 4th place at the Brazilian Grand Prix, the best result for the team since 2013 and still their best result since then. But then in 2020 and 2021, you could almost see him realize that the car wasn't that great and start winding down towards the end of his time in Formula 1. It had been 20 years since his debut, and he is a world champion, so I think we can let him off. He still did just about enough to beat Giovinazzi for a couple of seasons, but his Formula 1 career, I think personally, came to an end at just the right moment. And that of course means top of my list is Charles Leclerc. I know he only had 1 season with Alfa Romeo in 2018, I know that he was a rookie during that season, but there's a reason Ferrari jumped him straight up into the main team and he's been the #1 ever since. Charles Leclerc signed for the team, replacing Pascal Wehrlein alongside Marcus Ericsson. He picked up his first points 4 races into the season with a 6th place finish at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and it felt like from that point he was just gonna fly. Of course, he retired from the Monaco Grand Prix because he's cursed, but apart from that, he dragged the car to points finishes in 10 out of 21 Grand Prix, a figure that would have been so much higher had the team not had so many reliability problems. There's a real pattern here. Alfa Romeo often have reliability problems, with Charles Leclerc DNFing from 6 Grand Prix. But to end the season with 3 back-to-back 7th place finishes, 39 points, and a dream qualifying in Brazil where he stayed out on slicks with the track greasy and wet. It was just phenomenal to watch. But for me, that one season was so good that he tops this list. It was the best season from any Alfa Romeo driver by a good margin. Personally, I'll be sad to see the Alfa Romeo badge go from the Formula 1 grid, mainly because their Monza liveries usually bang. But reflecting on the drivers that they've had behind the wheel, it's a real mix. 3 rookies that have all gone in very different directions in Charles Leclerc, Zhou Guangyu, and Antonio Giovinazzi. I still can't believe that Gio is now immortalized as a Ferrari Le Mans winner. They had 3 great drivers that had won Grand Prix with other teams in Kimi Raikkonen, Valtteri Bottas, and Robert Kubica, all of which feel like they were taking a step backwards as their careers were coming towards an end by coming to Alfa Romeo. And then Marcus Ericsson, who, let's not forget, won the Indy 500 in 2022, meaning that as I'm editing this, I've just realized between these drivers, they've achieved the Triple Crown because Kimi won Monaco in 2005. So you've got Kimi, Gio, and Marcus Ericsson making up a kind of Alfa Romeo Triple Crown. It is a nice mix, but I am also very excited to see where this team is headed and see how that Audi project will come to fruition, especially once we get to the 2026 season. But I'd love to know your thoughts on Alfa Romeo. Now that we've come to the end of this most recent era in Formula 1, which driver defines that era for you? Are you sad to see them go? And how do you think the team will develop in 2022? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you've enjoyed this video, I also made this video here on Lance Stroll's controversial rise into Formula 1. So click that link and I'll see you over there. Lance Stroll's path through the junior categories attracted a lot of positive and negative attention. Even the first step in Lance Stroll's rise into Formula 1 was covered in controversy. Back in 2010,